This is lesson 2, turning up the style and data. I have the slides on my blog. So if you go to blogs.embarcadero.com/DavidI, over here, you'll find the link to a zip file in Code Central, and it's has the PPTX and a PDF of the slides. So you can grab that real quick to follow along. And then later today, I'll have the replay for the Object Pascal session as a link. And if you go to the previous blog post, you'll see the links to the YouTube recordings of the session from on Monday, lesson 1. And there's always at the bottom a playlist. So even if I don't get the blog updated, you can always just check back to the playlist. Let's bring that up on YouTube. And that'll have the links will show up there even if the blog isn't updated. So you can bookmark the playlist. Move this microphone cord out again. The lessons, this is lesson 2. This is lesson 2. And the replay links and lesson slides appear on my blog. So you can always go to the David I blog and see the links as I get all the pieces and parts done. Today we're going to talk about styles, particularly about user interface controls, the list box and the list view for collections of data that we might want in our application. We're going to talk about live bindings as a way of binding data and fields and properties of objects into the user interface elements. We're going to talk about the prototype bind source, which is a component that can generate sample data for you that you can connect to your user interface while you wait for the database to get delivered to you, or the connection to the database to be built. And then we'll continue to talk about our business app that we're building up each time, and we'll review and assign some homework and what we're going to cover next time. So styles are the way that FireMonkey uses to create the look and feel of the components: buttons, edit boxes, list boxes, text edit boxes, number boxes, and so on. And these are built up from primitives, shapes using brushes and color and rectangles and filled areas and so on. And you can put glow effects and all sorts of other things as well. The standard controls we have a default style associated with them for each of the platforms. You can override that style. You can change the style of an individual UI element, or you can globally change all the user elements by changing what's called a style book. The style book is a component that you can add to your application that contains a collection of all the style definitions for all the user interface elements and all the options of those elements. A button style alone, button styles, there's probably 10 or 15 different types of button styles that you can choose from. For edit boxes, there's several of those, for labels and so on. And the style book contains the definition of all of those, so you can use. And you can also use the style book component, if you put one on your application, to load a custom style. Every application you build, by default, when you use the file new template or new project, then it already contains a default style book for each of the platforms. So if you say I want to target Android, there's a default Android style book that's built into your application that matches the default style of Android. Now, and the same thing for iOS, the default standard of iOS. Now, so when iOS 6 changed to iOS 7 and the look was different, we created a default style for iOS 7. So when you say file new mobile application target platform iOS, and you say I want to, and I run it on an iOS 7 device, it included in your application bundle that's built is an iOS 7 default style. If you run that same application on an iOS 6 base device, like my old iPhone 3GS, which is stuck at iOS 6, they're not doing iOS 7 for 3G, then we also have an iOS 6 style built into the standard application bundle that you build for iOS. That way you build an application runs on iOS and iOS 6 and 7 till someday that there's no more iOS 6 devices out there. Then we could get rid of that iOS 6 style default. Same thing for Android. Android over time may have changed its style, and who knows, maybe Android L in the future will have a different default style. We'll give you a new Android default style file that's built into the application, and we'll also deliver that as an external style so you can choose it. Or if you want a different look, you can use the Bitmap Style Designer to create your own custom style file to have your application have its own look. You might decide that you want your application on all 4 platforms that we support, or at least on mobile, to have a common look to it, not the default look. That's your choice. Most people will want the style to look like all the other apps on their phone. Other companies, especially for internal use, for example, might decide that they want the same exact style on iOS, Android, Windows, and OS X. And you can do that with FireMonkey and with Rad Studio and App Method. 2 properties in particular. There's the style lookup property. That's how you can change based on the component that's currently selected. You can look at the different optional styles that are available, and you can override those styles and set other properties to affect the look of a component, like a button or a label, and so on. We provide style resolutions and standard styles for all the 4 platforms that we ship. So for Macintosh and iOS, there's 2 default. There's a style file that has both the single and Retina resolution, the 1x, 2x resolution, so that when you run your application on an iPhone 4, which is not Retina style, for example, it looks great. If you run it on an iPhone 5S, it looks great, with the Retina style. If you run it on an iPad 3, which was non-Retina, it looks great. If you run it on iPad 4, which is Retina, it looks great. And now the iPad Air. That is built in by default. It will load in the right style based on the target platform and device that you run on. On Android, the default style file and each of the style files get generated to support the 4 different resolutions that Android has, the 1x, 1.5, 2, and 3x resolutions. So again, if you run it on an older tablet that doesn't support a higher resolution versus a newer tablet or a newer phone, again, you don't have to make any changes unless you want to load in special styles. It just gives you that standard resolution, whatever it is on your device, automatically. Windows supports only standard resolution, at least for now. So again, when you build a desktop application for Windows, you get the style that matches the Windows style. The style files for iOS and Android are on your disk, on your hard drive as part of the install, so you can go and take a look at those. And you can change a style. So we'll look at an example and also build up a simple application with the style. So there you drop a component down, go to the object inspector, you go to the style lookup property, hit the down arrow, and you'll see different styles for a button or an edit box and so on. You can change that, and then we can also put a style book down and choose a style file for it and change all the look of all of the controls on our application. You can also load styles at runtime. There, you can compile them in at design time. You can also load them from external files at runtime. So you might have a setting choice in your application where the user could go and choose Android Dark, Android Light. Maybe you're doing Google Glass, a Google Glass style. Maybe it's an iOS style. Or for some reason, you're not ready for people to see the iOS 7 flat style. Some people don't like it. Load the iOS 6 style, for example. You can also, again, create custom styles. There's a great example. It's the control style. We'll quickly look at that, but it ships in the mobile samples area, so you can take a look at all the user interface controls, the standard and optional controls and additional controls in one application and play around with their styles in a mobile app sample that ships with the products. All right, let's go over the IDE. And let's say File New, FireMonkey Mobile Application, Object Pascal. Let's choose the blank application. And I was working before, so it pops up. Let's put down a button. Okay, here's our button, and it's a pretty standard button. It's rectangular. It's got a label in the middle. That's the way it would look on an Android Nexus 4, Galaxy S4. On iPhone, it would have this kind of flat look, but maybe you don't like the flat look, so we could go under Style Lookup for the button, and we could choose a different style. So, for example, that's the corner button style. There's a delete item style. Here's a list box item button. So That one's got a border. That looks pretty nice. It's got the rounded rectangles. Maybe you want that in your style. So this style lookup property for a button has all these different choices. Maybe the button you want is an arrow, or it's a stepper with a plus sign in the middle, or it's a tool button. It may be you want it as a trash can button to delete something, or you want it to be a delete button, or you want it to be a camera button because you want to be able to take a picture of something, but you still want underneath it to be a button that has a click event handler, right? So that's all done with styles, with bitmap styles for the button. So let's go back and keep this button as a standard button style, because that's the standard style by default that you would see in an iOS application, and again in an Android application. Let's put a toolbar at the top, and let's go and put a speed button in it, for example. So here's a speed button. Let's align that speed button to the right-hand side of the toolbar. And let's go down to its style lookup. And we'd like that to be, for example, an add item button. And let's, right, so it's there for us, and let's go and set its margin. Let's move it over just a little bit from the edge. And then we can put a toolbar label down. And let's align that to the contents area of our toolbar, and let's center it. And then we can go and set its style lookup to be a toolbar label, for example. All right. And then when it's on Galaxy S4, then it's not bolded. When it's on iPhone, it's bolded. If it's on iPhone 5, it's bolded and a little bit size. All right. And this is our button, so let's change its text. Now, there's other things we can do with styles. Let's put two more buttons down. Okay, here's that button. And let's add another button and put that next to it. And what we want to do is we want to group these two buttons. So we'll first set the left-hand button, set its style to be, let's go down here to toolbar button left, and then let's go and set this other button to toolbar button right. For example, and let's put them together. And then what we can do is group them as well. This way, if you notice, if we put them next to each other and we've got a toolbar button left and right, notice that the left-hand sides have the rounded corners and the right-hand side is rounded of this one, but they're squared off in the center, right? So that's done through style. Let's add one more button. Oh, sorry, I couldn't quite get to the button. Let's put another button in the middle, and let's set its style to be toolbar button middle. There's the middle button. Now let's line these up. Oh. So now these are three buttons, but they have, originally they were just these flat buttons in iOS, but because we set their style to left, right, and middle in toolbar buttons, this middle one has squared off corners, and these left and right ones have their outer side rounded. So that's how you can get that kind of look and feel that you see on different user interfaces. Now on Android, the buttons are just buttons that are hooked together. But on iOS, it renders their style so that it matches the user interface style that you see in iOS applications. Okay? So that's just a quick kind of look at styles. Now, let's put a style book down. So here's a style book. Style book is a non-visual control that we can specify a file name over here if it's a file name as part of our application. I can also double click on it to bring up the style designer, and I can say load, go to the styles folder, for example, for iOS or anywhere else, choose a style file and say apply and close. Oh, I chose not the iOS one, sorry. Let's go to iOS, for example. Let's choose the black style and let's apply and close. Oh, actually that other one would have worked. Now I've got a style file loaded into the style book, but I haven't associated it with my form. So I need to go over to the form in the object inspector, and it has a property called style book, and select that style book. Now I've got the black style. Now, if I go back and let's clear that for a moment, right? Notice that this label that I've specified as tool label is black on white. But if I load a style book style file, let's go back to it again. We want that black one. Let's apply it and let's associate the, oh, I probably already loaded it. Let's go to the form and associate that style book. Notice that the tool label in the black style for iOS, it defined the type tool label to have the color white, because otherwise what would happen is it would be black on black, right? If I just had a regular label which has the standard color of black, then we wouldn't be able to see that label very well. You'd probably sort of see it because this is a gradient fill, all right? So using styles and style books, if you set the right styles in these bitmap styles, unless someone was a bad bitmap style designer, it will set the right colors to make it look correct for each of the custom styles that you choose. So a great thing about using styles wherever you can. The other thing you can do is even within a certain style, like here's our button, there's a property, for example, called let's go in here and okay. And we can go in, for example, and change something like the font color. We want red font, for example. Let's go and go back to the form and change that that style book to be nothing. All right, so red is still there. If we want our button to have some other form, we can go in and take care of it as well. So again, the colors that are associated can either be done in each button through the object properties, or we can do it through styles. Let's go back to this and change it to, for example, a tool button, right? Okay. So you have all the possibilities of customizing the style you want. And again, if you want to go to the Bitmap Style Designer, it's under the Tool menu, Bitmap Style Designer. And there's lots of documentation about working with those. The control style, go File, Open Project. And under Samples, Object Pascal, Mobile Samples, there's User Interface. The control style, open that project. This has all of the different components that you might want to use inside of a tab control. So we can go, for example, and let's look at the list box page. Here's all the different elements of list box. This is what it'll look like on what it might look like on an iPhone or Nexus 4. If we go and look at controls page, here's the tracker bar. Here's segmented buttons, and again they have settings of segmented button left, middle, and right. Segmented buttons as a speed button. If you want them grouped together, you can set the style name to the same string. So each of these speed buttons has a string group 4 is what they're called. That also works if you want one of these buttons to be pressed by default. You can go and set the is pressed, and because they're grouped together, it'll make sure that only one of those buttons is is pressed down by default, so that kind of 3D look. Let's go to iPhone and look at it again. Here's the segments, right? Remember, notice again the left rounded, the straight corners, and the right mounted, all done with styles, right? So check out the controls example. Look at all the different tabs. It uses many of the different user interface control elements that are part of FireMonkey. The list box is there to contain a set of items in a scrollable list. And those items can be strings or text items. Those items in a list box could be images. You can put whatever you want inside of a list box, any user interface element. I've seen people put forms inside of list boxes. And then when you clicked on it, it would bring the form up and show it as a full screen. That's not the usual case. Usually what you'll have in a list box is a group of items, oftentimes in a settings page of an application. Like if you look at your settings on your iPhone or your Android phone, if you go to settings, let me switch over to my Macintosh here. So here's my iPhone. It's got the settings. Some of them are grouped together. So these are some settings grouped. Here's another set of groups. There's a header between them that can or doesn't have to have text. Here's some more settings and so on. So this is an example of a list box, and it's got some additional controls like a switch or a string. It might have a more button or a detail button with the arrow. It says there's more there. So if we go there and then a switch, and then we have a back button, right? And the back button has maybe an arrow and some text with it. So if we go back to the UI, and let's open up an example that ships with the product: mobile samples, user interface, settings project. So if we look at the settings demo, here it's got a list box. It's got a list box within a tab item. That's fine, but it's a list box. And the list box has its style lookup set to transparent list box style. That way we don't see the list box surrounding it. Just the list box items themselves will show up. If we turn that to a regular list box style, then we get all of the bits that are associated, including any leftover parts at the bottom where we didn't add an item. But if it's for settings that you do, then you'll want to use the list box style. That is the transparent list box style. So let's switch it back. That way you don't see the container anymore. You just see the items inside of the container. And then inside of the list box, you can have a group header. And you notice in my iOS settings by default, that was blank. I don't have to have text in there. I could have it be, I could have it just be a blank, sort of as a separator between different settings, for example. And then, but that was account settings, something like that. All right. Oh, okay. And the other thing is a group heading. It capitalizes everything. So I put lowercase, but it's there for me. That's a style. And maybe it's set underneath here. Nope, there it is as text as well. There's nothing else really in a group heading. For list box items, I have my text, which is associated with it, the account type. And then inside of the item data, I can have an accessory, either that more arrow, detail, which shows up as the information, the I with a circle around it, or a check mark. Just, check mark that's something that we want to deal with, or none. That's an accessory. You can have an optional bitmap if you want. You can also then put some detail information, in this case, the string personal. And then again, here's the item box list item setting called account type. Right? And then we have another group heading for synchronization settings. And then in this case, a couple switches for some additional settings that are part of my settings page in this example. There's a second page here, account type. That was the more information. If we click on account type, it's got an on-click event, which takes us and does a change tab to the next tab. And then there's a back button, so we can get the list box. The list box here is inside of a tab, so we can see the second tab, and then it has a back button at the top. Right. Okay, and the same thing here. So at design time, we can look at the interface here and move it, make sure it's set to wherever we want it to be set. So Luxbox, great for doing settings and doing short lists of choices or more complex settings. List view is meant to contain lots of items, maybe all the customers in a database. It also is a very lightweight control, and it supports the physics of scrolling, of slow and smooth or fast and smooth scrolling. You'll see that in lists of the emails that you get or alerts that you get. You'll see all of that in a list view. Items can have not only the text associated with them, but they can have an accessory icon. So let's go and look at a sample list view project. In the user interface list view, there's lots of different samples for Object Pascal. Let's just take the simple list view. So here we've got a whole set of items in our list. Let's go and let's see where we have this one on my okay. All right, let's switch to my Android view. And we've got a simple list view. So this list, okay, that means, let's see. Okay, oh, I know why. That was the C++. Oh, here it was. Sorry, it was there. I had one running that was built in C++, and then when I switched to the Pascal version. So here we've got lists, and we move through them. And again, the screen grabber is not going to do it justice, but trust me, it's smooth scrolling up and down. It's got the physics associated with it. It's got a search box option at the top, and we can scroll through the different items. If we go and look at this on iOS, where I'm using AirPlay, you get a better maybe look at it. So here's the list view. Again, we can zoom through it really fast. I'm not sure what GoToWebinar is going to do to it because it's doing screen grabbing as well. But we've got the, if you get to the beginning, you've got the drag down and bounce back, right? So all that's part of the list view. If we select an item, it's selected and so on. There's also an option. I'm trying to swipe left, but in this case, I didn't turn on swipe to delete. There's an option for the list view. If we select the list view, there's a property called can swipe delete, and let's make sure that's turned on. Let's also go to the list view, and there's a setting down here, a search visible, and then it puts a search box at the top, so it'll search for items that match a text that we put in. Let's go and build this one for iOS, this changed one with the search box and the swipe delete. Let's compile and run it. Use list view when you have lots of items, for example, coming from an in-memory data set or a database. Use list box when you have a shorter set of items that you want to display, and you may need to display several different kinds of controls in a list box item itself. So let's go back to view of my application, and then simple list view will start up. Now it'll have the search box, and it'll have the swipe. If I drag my finger to the left, it'll have the swipe delete option. So if we want to get rid of this item, I drag select to the left, delete. Same thing happens on Android. Both iOS and Android, that support is there. If I want something like, for example, with SA, then we get items that have SA in them. So that's just built-in functionality by turning on that search box. Now, live bindings, if we want to bind data and or fields in an application, we have a view called the Live Bindings Designer. And this application sample used live bindings. Let's zoom this up down here a little bit so you can see it better. So our data is coming from this data source, and the list view that we're associated with, for example, the item text is this color name, but if we want maybe the contact name instead, we just drag and connect. Now we have all the contacts in our contact list. And if we don't want a bitmap there, maybe we want a color. Let's just drag that up. It didn't like that type. So let's go and put a different bitmap up, for example. And let's go back to set the contact name and be there. Okay. So now we have a color bitmap instead of that little kind of temporary image of a person. So we use the live bindings to drag and drop to synchronize items between the list view and where the data is coming from. There's a sync property, and we can go and connect that to the star. Think of, in the SQL parlance, select star from a table, select star from a view, or select some fields from a view. And so the fields are there. This is using the prototype bind source, and we'll talk about that in a moment. There's also a list or a live bindings wizard, and that's right mouse click in the context menu and bring up the wizard. You turn that on by going Tools, Options, Live Bindings, check this checkbox, Display Live Bindings Wizard in the context menu. All right, so wherever we point in our application, if we right mouse click and bring up the Live Bindings Wizard, whichever control is selected, it will take us through a set of binding tasks in multiple pages. Link a list view with a field, for example, or link list view with a component property. What's the source of the data that's coming? Either it could be a new source like a database connection or another prototype bind source. Again, more about prototype bind source in a moment. Oh, I have to choose the data source. Maybe we want to, instead of contact name, for example, we were on that item, choose colors name. And then do we want a navigator? A navigator is this button bar. Let's just add one. And let's go again and activate it. And then we've got our navigator here, and we've got our label, and we've got to add some data to the text. So let's put the contact name again. There it is. And let's put that contact bitmap into the bitmap item. And then this navigator we might want to align to the top of our user interface. That way, when we run the application, it will we can step through one at a time. We can insert, delete. We can apply any changes, do a refresh from the data. We could also, here we've got this title label. So if we want to see what when contact were currently selected, then we just use the live bindings designer to connect to the text property of the label that's up here in the toolbar, for example. All right. We can zoom in this and in and out. We can also right mouse click and save the live bindings design to a bitmap, to an image, so that we could add it to our documentation. And we talked about the wizard. Again, there's multi-pages. It's contextual, or if you put it on the form, if we're on the form, then we just right mouse click live bindings wizard. Now it'll step us through. What do you want to do? You want to link a control with a field. What's the field that you want? I want a new control. Here's all the different controls. Maybe I want to put an edit somewhere on the user interface, and I want to bind that, for example, to the contact name. And let's put a label on the control. So here now we've got an edit box with the column name or the field name as the caption, and we've got the component there. So let's go and run this just for the heck of it. Let's use the mobile preview on Win32, our application. And as we step through the different, or we use the toolbar, and then we're seeing here's the current contact name. I'd probably put that up somewhere up here in the toolbar as well. If we find all the peoples who's got AN in their name, then again, we can use the search and so on. Right. So this, you could do all of this in code. You could take a value and put it into the live list views, items, array, whichever item you chose. You could populate a list view from a data set or from an XML file or whatever. You have all those choices of doing things that way. The next one is the prototype bind source. And you've seen that a little bit in action. It's basically there to create some data so you can prototype your user interface. And then eventually, when we have real data connections, we just change the source of data for the list view, for example, to be our database access instead of the prototype bind source. In the prototype bind source, you can create fields. So this was the prototype bind source. You can have any number of them. If we right mouse click and bring up the fields editor, you'll see that we selected a few current ones, and those are the ones that are showing up down in our bind source. We could add another one, and then it gives us a list of items. So for example, if we need a date time data element, then we've got a date time data element. And then down in our date time field, maybe we want to put the date time field to the text label. Now we have the date time for each element that we go through up in the label, right? So it's pretty easy to use the prototype bind source to get started working with data and data types even before you have the database. And as you saw, I just connected the sync in the list view to the star of the data source, the asterisk, and then we get the data working as I use the navigator, as I maybe did a gesture to move through and select different items from a list box or a list view. So you have those possibilities. Again, there's a little sample. It's in the slides for you to create your own. Go and create a starting mobile app, put a prototype bind source, add some data, add a bind navigator, put a list box, put a string grid, and then use Live Binding Designer to connect them together with a diagram like this. That way you'll see in your list box and a string grid as you step through the different items in your data source, in this case, the prototype bind source. There's lots of examples. We looked at the simple settings and the simple list view. There's many more in those subdirectories under user interface for Object Pascal that you should take a look at. Now for our business mobile app, what I want you to do before the next time is to add a prototype bind source into the application. Go to the customer tab, put a list view down on the customer tab, set the can swipe delete for the list view. Go to the prototype bind source and add some columns, add some fields, and then connect with the Live Bindings Designer. Connect the prototype bind source to the list view. And then on the settings tab, we want you to put some buttons down, set the transparent style, add a list, put a list box down, put a couple entries in it, one for order shipped that you want, and put a switch. Parts back ordered, put a switch. These are 2 notifications we'll play around with in lesson 6, back into the service. So starting to build up in our mobile app, the data, look and feel of our application, and the settings that we might want to put. Maybe it's username for logging in, might be the connection to the database in the future. I'll be working on the next generation of the business mobile app. I'll put that up for download for you. So here we looked at how you can customize styles, playing with listbox, really good for settings and for limited items of data that you want as a scrollable list. List view for large amounts of data where you're going to be scrolling through very fast, usually using your finger to grab and move up and down, the swipe delete, the click and select. Maybe it'll navigate and transfer when you click on it on the on-click event to display detailed data about a customer item, and that's what will be added to that customer page. We'll have the customer list, click on it, and it'll take you to a detailed page form where you can see all the customer information, edit it, and do things. The prototype bind source to be able to build your user interface even before you have the database. As long as all you have to do then is replace the prototype bind source with a connection to real data, it snaps in and you have real data showing up in your user interface. All right. Lots of resources. Download the slides. There's links to tutorials. There's great tutorials on live bindings, on using the list view, iOS and Android. There's tutorials for working with styles, and there's lots of documentation online and built into the help. I like to use the Doc Wiki. It's just easy. It's in a separate window, and it's easy to navigate around in a browser. So For next time, before next time, your homework is to create an app, file new, mobile, Object Pascal, put some controls down, play with the style lookup, set the different styles, play around with those, put a style book down, load the different style files, see what they look like at design and runtime by setting the style book property in the form. Look at more of the samples, go to the doc wiki from the resources page. And again, I will put, probably tomorrow, I'll put up the first and second iteration of the business mobile app, so you can take a look at that. And then next lesson, it's accessing local storage, both local files in your file system using the IOUtils unit, lets you navigate to your documents folder and other folders as part of your application sandbox. We'll set up and learn about INI files. So when we save those settings on the mobile app and set them, we want to persist those. So we'll create an INI file and store the values out. And then we start the application up another time. We'll have it on form create, load the INI file, pull the settings out, and populate the settings page. We'll also take a look at the FireDAC data access components that let us access SQL databases. It also comes with an in-memory data set called an FDMEM table, and you can have those. So you may never have a database on disk. You might have just an in-memory table and then save that memory table locally on your device. There's an option for that. We'll also take a look at using FireDAC to access SQL databases local on the mobile device. SQLite, which comes with every mobile platform. Interbase Lite, which is a free, full ANSI SQL 92 database that is free to deploy when you have a paid license for our products. So you can have full ANSI SQL inside of your mobile application. IB Lite has limitations on one transaction active at a time, no database encryption. We have IB to go, which is a static library you can link in. It's a per user charge, and you can buy bundle packs as well. It supports multiple transactions live at the same time and database encryption at the column level and at the database level. So we'll talk more about that in lesson 3 next Monday. So with that, Jim and Al, if you're still there and I haven't lost everybody, Q&A. And while I'm in the Q&A, I'll start playing around with the next incarnation of our business app.
Can you dynamically change the style depending on iOS version the app is running on?
Yes, you can. You can query and there's an example. I think if you look at the device info example that's in the mobile samples, you can query the operating system you're running on, the version of the operating system. You can query the device you're running on. Are you on a tablet? Are you on a phone? You can look at the size, but you can and then load the right style. By default, we'll load the right style. So FireMonkey, when it starts up your application on a mobile device, if it sees it's running on iOS 6, it chooses the iOS 6 style. It's already built into the application. If it's running on iOS 7, it uses the iOS 7 style. If it loads on Android, usually it's, what's the default? Android Lite? Or what is it?
It's Lite. Yes.
It's the Lite style. So that's the default style. You can see you're running on different versions of Android. And then you can, the default style file that's built into the application bundle will use the right style. If you want to use an alternate style, again, you saw how to use the style book. But you can query, there's samples in the samples and snippets area for querying the operating system version you're running on and the device you're running on.
Okay.
I'd look at device info is probably the best one to look at.
In FireMonkey, is it possible to attach database fields to controls programmatically like you did in the VCL?
And the answer is yes. There's a add field or create field call. There's methods for that. So look at prototype bind source where you can create a field on the fly dynamically. You can also do that when you have real database access. You can create, in a sense, calculated fields or in-memory fields. There's a method.
How can I make just one T-combo box have 2 or more text fields using styles?
I want to have a combo box. Combo box contains items, and the items are strings. So that's a standard combo box. If you want to have more than just a single string, let's think about that. T combo box. If I could type, I don't know what's with me today. So here's a combo box. We'll go to the items editor. So your choice is the combo. Combo box has items. So we add an item there, and then we go to that item. Let's go to item 1, and we put. Let's put a couple items here. Add a couple items. All right. So in here, if what you're saying is on this item 1, let's give it a string, like hello. Can I put something else in it? Let's put a switch.
It looks like it's a detail, doesn't it?
Well, now let's go and run this just on a Win32 mobile preview. It's just faster while we're sitting here. I use that for prototyping all the time. So,
the 4th tab.
Oh, I'm on the 4th tab. Sorry. Good. See, that's why you got to help me because I'm crazy. So here it is. No, it's, when I selected it, I got the other button. What I would do instead of using combo box, I would just use a list box. I'd use a list box and make it small so you'd scroll within it. But I don't know of a way to have them all appear at the same time, but I'll explore that. You can explore that as well.
So how did the T-switch object get added to the list view by sync via USB, etc.?
That was in a list box, and that's what I was working on. Let me get rid of this thing real quick because I don't want that on that page. Let's go back to settings. I created a list box, and then I'm going to add an item. So let's add a T. First, I want a header, so let's put a list box header up there. And then we'll go and also add a T list box item. And so the list box item, this is going to be, let's see, we'll call this light control. It's not what I'm doing in this mobile app, but then I went in and I just added a switch to that list box item, and I align it to the right of the client area. I'll change that heading in a moment, or that label, so it's right. And then I'm going to set the margin to 4 pixels so it's not smack dab at the end. And then let's go and set the list box transparent style. So transparent style, and then set the color of the text to something else, right? So there, and this one is meant to be not light control. This is going to be receive push notifications. So let's give it a string. Let's see, order our items, parts, backlogged, notification.
Not sure if it's just me or what, but the screen's lagging. It might just be me because no one else is mentioning it. But
okay.
Just in case.
Yeah. So there, and then in the heading, let's put some text. We'll put a label in here. Let's see. Let's put a label, and that one we want to have the style a toolbar label. Toolbar label, and we'll align this to the left. It could be around this time we start. I think it's Citrix. They have some stuff happening. So this is my like notification settings. Maybe we'll call this one. Okay, so that's starting building up, and that's just a list box item with its text property, and I put a switch parented in the list box item. So this switch is going to be the parts backlog switch. I'll give it a component name, and we'll save that out. All right. So here it's just, I'm on. Oh, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, we'll go to the settings page, and now we've got, something there. Right.
So now the list item also has a details as well as a text, and you can sure display both those.
If I go to a list box item and I look at item data, then I can put a detail. So this is like click me. something like that.
And you can change the style to show that.
Yep. And then there's a style here. List box item detail, right? Oh, wait, sorry, wrong one. Okay, style, list box item. Detail label. Is that the one, Jim?
It's like detail left, detail right, or something like that. So
is it
style lookup?
Yeah, I'm in style lookup. Oh,
there, like right there, like the style bottom detail. Second item on the top. List box item bottom.
Oh, there it is. Okay. So then we have, here's the string, here's the detail that gives you some more information, like click me. I'm going to go and kill this dark style just by getting rid of the style book. Okay. All right. And then, we'd add some other items for some other settings choices as well. All right. And again, that's associated with if I go to the look and feel, for example, on my iPhone or Android phone, right? You see this kind of stuff. There's a heading which doesn't have anything. There's some settings and then a gap. That's another heading. Some more items with the more arrow, and that's an item detail that's back here in the user interface. So for an item, if I want in the item detail, I want an accessory, I could say more, and then maybe I would move this over a little bit. Let's see what I do. I aligned it to the right. So I want this to be none. And then I can move it over just a little bit so it's away from the detail. So maybe I have a switch and I don't know. It doesn't make much sense, but you can do it. Right. In this example.
So it says I'm using a T grid to display database data to my mobile apps, but it's not. Is there a way to improve performance to user navigation, drag up, drag down? Is there an alternative? What is it? And kind of display multi-column lists data using a list view and how.
So we're gonna cover that next time with database. On mobile devices, the grids and string grids with lots of columns. I mean, unless you're on a tablet, maybe it makes more sense. But those are heavier weight controls. What I usually do is I put a list view down with a more button, and when I select the item in the list view, I navigate to another page where I get the detail about that item. If what you want is a bunch of rows and columns like a spreadsheet on an iPad Retina display, then you have a couple of options. You could create a list box and put some data in parts of the list box and do all the alignments and everything. Better to just use a string grid or some other grid. There are other third-party grids as well.
So I was going to say wall-to-wall has a pretty nice mobile grid.
Their InfoPower grid that they have for FireMonkey, and it works on iOS and Android. So you might check wall-to-wall, WOLL, the number 2, WOLL, InfoPower grid. TMS software also has a grid, a FireMonkey grid, that works on desktop and mobile.
Is there any way of editing the clickable area in a list view via styles or some other way so that there could be two distinct buttons in the list view? Currently, a button can be placed in a list view item, but clicking it also triggers the click event of the list view item. So I actually saw someone doing this in a second. There's a different event you can look at on the list view that gives you the mouse location or the touch location.
Yeah, let me put the list view and align it. I'm on the customer page now. Let's align that to the client area.
That's the list box.
Oh, sorry. That's where we're going to put our customer list. And in the events, you've got on click.
I think it's the change repaint button tells you the click location.
You've got on item click. The on item click will tell you the item that you clicked on.
So go to the click EX, the next event.
Oh, sorry. You're right. Yep. And we go to click EX, and that gives us the object that you clicked on and the click position.
Yep.
And the local position.
Yep. And so you can just say if it's the X is greater than whatever, then it's this column, or less than, etc.
So local click dot x, whatever. Serena may have done a blog. If I find a blog or a sample for both clicking on an item or clicking extended to get the specific position on the item, again, use the local click position on the item, and you also will get the object that you click. That's good for, did you hit the more button? Did you hit whatever? If you want to do some special processing. If I find a reference for that, I'll put it in the blog for lesson 2 as additional resources.
The background style of the toolbar and the height of the toolbar.
You can change just about everything of everything in FireMonkey that's visual. So what you want to do is go, for example, in a form and put a style book and go and look. So he wanted which background did he want?
The
Background style. There's background style, so you can go and change the background style. What you use is you use the object inspector. If you want the background style to not be, black, put it something else. Right? So everything, these are all the different elements. I want you to go and look at the style designer in the IDE. So for its container, and I want you to look at every one of these items. So here's track bar style. Let's see, toolbar. If I'm on a toolbar style. So there's the toolbar style, right? So if you want to change that toolbar style from that kind of gradient to something else, you can change its opacity, all those things. Right? iOS transparent style Bing, you can give it a different bitmap. Yeah. Just go down to each, find the thing that you want, toolbar button left, find it, and you can change its properties here, or you can bring up the bitmap style designer. Because again, all the FireMonkey controls, except for where we map the native, like date picker, time picker, combo box, which is the custom picker, they're built up from these primitives. And that's how TMS software, they've done a whole set of components, and others have been building FireMonkey components. Ray Konopka does sessions at Code Rage about using styles to build up components. So you can take a look at his Code Rage 7 and Code Rage 8 sessions on creating FireMonkey components, and he shows you how to do a bunch of the work just using styles versus using a whole bunch of code.
Yeah, that's a really good resource if you want to learn more about styles. Just check out the Ray Konopka session.
And I'll put those links in my blog. It's, again, Code Rage 7, Code Rage 8 Delphi edition, usually in the fall, or C++ edition in the winter, in February. Ray does a great job.
Wiki on how to create a custom style?
Yes, and I linked from the resources section to it.
Okay, you do. All right.
Here, customizing FireMonkey style designer. Yeah, and then working with native and custom, and there's links off there for creating your own style. In particular, when you look at the bitmap style designer.
So here's another question about adding another text item to a list box, and say a combo box or list view or list box item.
You can you can parent to a list box item. You can parent a whole bunch of stuff. So here I've put the backlog switch over here, but if I want to put in there, if I want to add another component like a label, then I can have a label. You just need to make it all fit, right? So here's another label that's just parented to a list box item. This might
so
be.
There's certain things that are built into list box items.
Correct.
But beyond that, you can parent anything else you want.
You can parent anything. Again, a form, a bitmap, an image, a grid. You could put a grid in a list box item. Maybe a very small version. Maybe that small version, right? You shrink it way down and then tap on it and have an on-click, bring it full screen or something. You can parent.
You're probably better off using a bitmap, though, in that situation.
Yeah, that'd be better, is to put a bitmap that says, hey, there's a grid, and then switch. But, don't do this. But you can parent anything. The other thing is you can add items to a list box item in code. And same with the list view, you can add items in code, and the help will show you that what you should do is call the begin update method for either list box or list view if you're going to add a lot of things to it, and then have code that adds a lot of things to it, and then call end update. and then it'll flash. Then everything will show up on the screen. All right. Because if you just call add item, they'll start flashing up there and it'll flash up. But if you're populating a list box or a list view, better to call begin update at the beginning, end update at the end, and you'll get that, that Shazam appearance. Right. And again, that's in the help in the doc wiki on listbox and list view. They'll recommend if you're just putting one thing in, then just call add item, add object, that you're doing. Otherwise, call begin update, and then when you're done, end update. It was sort of like when we were doing painting years ago on Windows, right? You would do all your operations under the covers and then show it. So check out begin update and end update methods on list view and listbox. It looks over to make sure it's still recording. And while you're doing that, I'm in here working on the next phase of the Mobile Adventures app. So over here, I've got my list view now. I'm going to right mouse click, bring up the live bindings wizard, and it says list view with a field. Okay, I want to do that. What am I don't have any existing sources, so my new source is going to be a prototype bind source. And I want to have, for example, a contact name as part of my data. So we'll add that. And I can add maybe the contact title, and maybe that's that. And then I don't care about a navigator. And now I have my my prototype bind source created, and I can go to the View Live Binding Designer and make sure that the list view is synced with the data. And let's go. The list view. And let's go and put the contact name in the item text. And in that's good. So now I have all my, there's my customers, right? And the more button that's there. So now we've got the customer page with this prototype bind source getting ready for us. And we can do the same thing for employees, create another prototype bind source, and for parts just to start building up the user interface of our Marine Adventures mobile app.
So here's a question. If live bindings or code is faster for data binding?
They're probably about the same. The live bindings engine runs in the application thread, so it's constantly looking for work to do as you're scrolling, as you're doing things, making edits and changes. I haven't timed the code versus using live bindings. It's probably about the same. I've
heard there's some cases, some things are faster, in some cases other things are faster. It depends on
if you, in code, again, if you're adding a bunch of stuff to a list box or list view, again, if you use the begin update, end update, it might look cleaner and faster. But it's your choice. It's that trade-off of, do you just play around with this live bindings designer view, which is easy to just connect all these things together, or having to write code that you may or may not put bugs in. If it's simple assignments, they're probably about the same. If you're doing more complex construction of list view or list box, maybe code will be faster. I haven't timed it. I like the ease of just connecting things together here. It's just easier for me to do my work, right?
Is there a way to define custom prototype bind source field? It's like a simple digit or positive numbers. I think Malcolm Groves did a thing on that.
Okay, for custom generators for prototype bind source. Let's see if I go here. So that was back in XE3. It probably still works today. All I did was search for prototype bind source custom generators. malcolmgroves.com/blog/P=1254. So we got a little further on our mobile app, and again, I'll keep putting incarnations of this up, and everybody can be doing the same because I give you the steps to sort of go through. So here we have our customer information there through the prototype bind source, and then we can work on the employee and parts prototype bind sources. And then next time we'll replace the prototype bind source with database connections and just snap in the live binding designer. The cool thing is, because it's querying the metadata, is I'll just go in here and I'll see my database connection over here, and I'll just grab the column, which is the customer name, and snap it to the list view item text, and it'll say, oh, do you want to delete that one? The other way is you can select one, right mouse click, and remove the link. Okay. And then connect up something else to it.
So the question here, if every style is a bitmap style now, I
Yep.
believe they're all bitmap styles now, right?
Yep.
I think what we found is that the vector styles were harder to maintain, and plus they couldn't get the exact look and feel we were going for.
Yeah.
So
we want pixel by pixel, pixel perfect, magnifying glass on a screen, high resolution camera. Okay, everyone.
yeah.
Bye.